I guess if you were really loved by your mother, she would tell you, don't run with those scissors. You know? Roger probably got told by his mother 50 times, don't touch the hot stove, son. You know, it took a while to sink in. So safety is a big part of our lives whether we realize it or not. So we intrinsically do many things to keep ourselves safe. And then human nature also allows us to do stupid things like run that red light when we shouldn't. But what I want to speak about today is kind of the human issue in safety as it relates to industry and as it relates to technology. Here we have a couple of pictures that depict some different aspects of safety. So we've all seen the people standing around, well, one person has a shovel and there's 4 people making sure he's safe. So the concept of safety in numbers we'll come back to a little later. Then we have this, the opposite concept of safety. Yeah, to boldly go where no one's gone before, and I sure as hell wouldn't want to be the person up in that piece of equipment. But industry allows us to do both of these activities. So I don't want to get too much into the cost, into a ton of data, because you can get really bogged down into statistics. But this is a very clear statistic. So 3 workplace deaths every day and 1 in 64 workers hurt on the job every year. So in Canada, it's costing us approximately $20 billion every year in industry. And this is industry-related statistics, okay? What's interesting about these statistics is they were put together by a company whose whole job is just to talk about safety. So we have the indirect costs of safety. Everybody's familiar with these. You know, you can sit in lots of meetings and people will talk about the direct and indirect costs of safety. Can we qualify some of these? Can we quantify some of these? So if you have employee morale, if you have pain and suffering of your employee, can we actually put a number on that? No. But does that make it devalued? So in your company, if somebody gets injured, you have all the direct costs, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you have the indirect costs. Which one affects you the most? And this is a big problem when it comes to settlements, is how do you quantify pain and suffering of the employee? How do you quantify the effect of employee morale on your company? And how does that affect your productivity? And what can we do to stop having these problems? The direct costs, of course, are much easier to quantify. And again, there is a ton of literature on these costs to companies. If you're a small company, these direct costs could end your business. Even though you have insurance, even though there's indemnities, it can be extremely costly. They've come up with a formula, and I don't know, has anyone seen this formula before? It has quite interesting results. So what they want you to do is to calculate your profit margin by dividing its total profits by total sales, and then divide the total cost of an injury or an illness by your company's profit margin. So simple numbers. If you have a claim of $4,000 and you have a 5% profit margin, it's going to cost you $280,000 to make up that loss. And this is what a lot of small companies don't realize. And the numbers are there. Again, if you had the 5% margin, because that's what's quantitative in this formula, you have to do a lot of sales to cover a $100,000 claim. I picked this picture out of far too many pictures that you can see of injury and accidents and of equipment. But this one really elicited a sense of loss, I thought. You know, this is a catastrophic kind of incident. And you can imagine there's some pain and suffering associated with this particular accident. I'm sure a lot of you know who Peter Drucker is. He was a very famous American businessman and leader in industry, and wrote a ton of books on how you should manage your company. And he was extremely successful in managing his company. And he thought a lot about technology. And he basically came to this conclusion that issues around technology are not the technical aspects of whatever technology you're dealing with. It's the human aspects that are linked to that technology and how that technology can affect the humans who are forced to use that technology. So in putting this presentation together, I decided I better see how many associations there are that are directly resulting from making safe places for people to work. This is a very small cross-section of them. I'm quite glad that we have the Canadian Dam Association. I thought I'd really like people keeping our dams safe. We have North American Regulators Working Group on Safety Culture. Well, what the heck is that? And how do you quantify safety culture? So we have an entire industry that has grown up around the idea of safety. So for me, it's the work of safety that has created all of these huge organizations that employ a ton of people. But the question that begs to be asked is, how effective are these associations in getting companies and individuals to act in a safe manner and to use technology safely? Who's responsible? What happens is we have all of these regulations, but what ultimately ends up when there is a big incident, when there are tragedies, when there are obvious violations of safety and environmental standards, the companies choose to pay huge fines instead of implementing effective safety systems within their organizations. And it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, it doesn't matter what country owns the business, they will choose, for the most part, to pay a fine, because ultimately it's cheaper for them. So for BP in the coast of Mexico, they'd rather pay $4 billion than invest more money in the safety of their rigs. And in the report that was put out in court, they made it very clear that there were really distinct areas where the safety management didn't exist. It wasn't being followed. Their protocols, they had great big books on safety, they had protocol up the yin-yang, but it wasn't followed. So here's our ladder. And there were thousands of pictures of people on ladders. And we actually have an association of engineers whose whole job is to make people using ladders be safe. So what have they done? They've put stickers on their ladders. They've put videos on YouTube on how to use a ladder. They have gone out of their way to use any manner they can think of to make people use ladder safety. Well, there are thousands of images on the internet showing people doing stuff like this. So this is one of my favorites because he's using things that have wheels. This guy has a fridge above his head, and they're holding the ladder. So this goes back to the whole concept of the human issue of safety. And that's our biggest problem when it comes to safety. You can have all the regulations you want. You can have a gazillion people walking around with their safety protocols and all of the internet safety courses that you can take. But this is the problem that you're really facing, is the human aspect of it. So, you know, that's awesome. He's actually using somebody's back so he can take his saw and make a cut. This is great too, you know. I really like this. This is why women live longer, because we would never set ladders up like that. And I have to say, of all the pictures that I looked at, there were no women doing stupid things on ladders or anything else, actually. Exactly. They're the people filming it, right? And they probably have really good insurance policies. Exactly. So, you know, and we've all seen stuff like this. I used to be in the construction industry, and I could tell you stories of, you know, you just stand there, oh my God, you're gobsmacked that somebody built this or somebody did something like that. It's insane. The problem is us. So again, whose responsibility? Now, everyone sitting in this room has worked for people, worked with people, or have their own company. And let's be honest, these are a lot of the things that we have to think about when we're talking about safety. People are the most challenging variable when it comes to implementing and maintaining safety. You have the stupid factor. Not my money, not my problem. I don't have to worry about it. So the biggest thing that science has found is that anxiety in an environment decreases the ability to focus, which directly increases unsafe action. And this has been proven time and time again on work sites, at universities. There's a huge study that just focuses on anxiety and safety. The lack of education, powerlessness, you feel like it doesn't matter, your boss doesn't help you keep things safe. This is a big issue in the data as well, is if your top end doesn't support your safety people, you're going to have a lot more accidents than somebody whose company has a CEO or has a board of directors that puts safety as one of their main pillars. I want to talk about OSHA. Does anybody know who OSHA is? Yeah, so especially our American friends here. So it's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the United States. Now, before OSHA was founded, between about 1937 and 1969, for 32 years there was no agencies whatsoever that looked at safety, regulated safety, had anything to do with safety. Between 1937 and 1969, the fatality rate dropped 58% in the States. OSHA was initiated in 1969 with the mandate to make whatever workplace you worked in safe. And it didn't matter whether it was on the docks, in a mine, in the grocery store. Their mandate was to make American workers safe. So it took OSHA 40 years to achieve a 58% decrease in fatalities. So the agency did a poorer job than when there was no agency. During the first 20 years of OSHA's existence, 93% of the fatalities that happened in workplaces were did not go to any kind of court action, did not go anywhere. Nothing happened to the companies. They might have paid the people off, but they were never prosecuted. They weren't investigated. And this comes down to, again, data. Everybody wants data, but if you don't do anything with the data, you're ineffective. So what's happened with OSHA is nobody enforces the regulations. They have an incredible set of safety protocols, but they're not enforced. They don't have the people to enforce them. Unfortunately, I don't know why it's not on there, because it was on there 2 minutes ago. Has anybody ever heard of the International Labor Organization? Anybody? No, I hadn't heard of it before I started to work on this presentation. They gather all of the statistics from 122 countries. They have a mandate to look at labor. In that mandate, they also have to look at safety protocol. Their safety protocol, the reason that they're doing this is to secure enforcement of regulations, supply technical information, and also to notify competent authorities. Now, to me, I find that a bit of an oxymoron, to notify competent authorities, because judging from all of the data, there either are no competent authorities or they're not being notified, because there's a big gap in between action and action. What was astounding to me, and before I get to that, in their mandate, they have a really detailed mandate. So, lost time, fatalities, non-fatal, and in those categories, they do it by injury by sex and migrant status, economic activity, incapacity or economic activity, how many fatalities and non-fatalities there are for 100,000 workers, and that is then broken down by sex and migrant status. So they have a huge amount of data they're collecting. And I thought, wow, this is great. I'm going to get a lot of really good data to talk to you about. So the first thing they do is they send out and they check in various countries around the world how many inspectors there are for every 10,000 workers. Now, when I looked at their data, I kind of looked again, and I looked at it again. Because in Canada, in 2015, we had 0.1 inspectors for every 10,000 workers. Does that not seem strange to you? Well, half of that person is very busy somewhere doing something. However, in a country like Aruba, in 2011, they had 2.3 inspectors. Croatia had 1.4 inspectors in 2015, so they're kicking Canada's butt. And the States was as bad as Canada. According to the data, there's nobody out inspecting anything. Now, that's not true. So their data is no good. Then they also can give you very interesting data on how many times an inspector actually goes to your factory in 132 countries. Well, I found that very interesting too, and if this would have got, don't know why it's not on there, it's on. So they start from 2000 and go to 2015. So this is very current data. So again, I picked Canada. I thought, great, this is good, we'll pick Canada. They have data for 2014 and 2015. I don't know what, obviously we haven't had any inspectors doing anything for quite a while. So in 2014, we had 6,129 inspectors go out and check. And this includes oil sites, meat packing places, candy factories. Last year, or 2015, we had one. According to, everybody went on holiday, I don't know. We had one. In the United States, they get 2 levels. So nothing happened up until 2010 in the United States. Their inspectors decreased as the years increased. So out of 122 countries, there were only 3 countries that showed a steady increase in inspector visits. It's pretty bad when Costa Rica has more inspections than Canada. And of course, we all know this data isn't real. But this data helps to develop protocol around the world. And it shows a really serious problem in the area of safety. because it's not being taken seriously. Well, that's my next little tidbit of information. Does anybody want to guess how much it will cost to have this data collected for 2018, 2019 around the world by this international labor? Well, almost. $636 million plus dollars. Just the safety mandate, not all the other labor stuff. Just the safety mandate. What do you do with this? Like, there's little islands in the Indian Ocean that have a better safety record than the United States of America or Canada. So what happens is people can take this data and manipulate it so that they don't have to put a bunch of money into safety. They don't have to pay for a lot of stuff. So that's why safety, we all assume that this is great. We have great safety rules. But we don't if it costs Canada $20 billion a year due to accidents and fatalities. So we're doing something wrong from the get-go, and we have very poor data to support anything that we're doing. So here, you got all these industry icons giving us all these tidbits of knowledge and wisdom, and it's great for them to sit in their boardroom and tell us this because they're not actually out in the mud. So you can't manage what you don't measure. Well, we're measuring, but we don't really have good measurements. So we can't even manage what we're measuring because our measurements are not any good. You can only improve what you measure. Again, we're not measuring properly. So any improvement we do, is it effective? Are we spending our money properly? I don't have any data to tell you yes or no. I love Deming anyways. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion, right? And again, you know, there's lots of Archie Bunkers in the world that we should be doing this, this, and this, but nothing's happening. So to bring it down to a company level, to your level where you have people who work for you or you work for someone, there has to be leadership from the CEO and the board of directors. There has to be a culture of safety developed within your own establishment, within your own business. That's the only way you're going to be effective. There has to be communication about it, and there has to be a clarity of safety. What you're asking people to do has to be really clarified, because then you can quantify it, you can collect data on it, you can make matrix, and you can move forward with decisions more accurately. So how does technology work into this? Well, a technology like One Eye Industries does help you with your safety record. To harken back to Dale's presentation, frequency. If you decrease the frequency of your sending a worker out on a road, or him going into a situation or taking apart a piece of equipment and putting that piece of equipment back together, starting up, shutting down, if you decrease that frequency, you have a direct correlation. You don't need a bunch of data. You have a direct correlation to a decrease in the opportunity for injury. And that's what technology can do to help us to be safer. But you can have all the technology in the world. If you don't have a top-down decision-making CEO or board of directors who makes safety a #1 issue, you can have all the technology you want. You've all been in industry. What trends do you see happening in safety? Pain be your guide, so you're gonna do it until you get a finger chopped off, or?
No, I haven't got all my fingers yet, so.
Good. I know that there's an entire industry, as you know, that has built up on the idea of safety. So think of all the people when you go onto an oil site, of all the safety measures there are, all of the toolbox meetings, the safety meetings. Every morning you have a safety meeting. Every morning you go over the regulations. Why are we then having these statistics of $20 billion and so many people killed a year and 1 out of 64 workers injured in a year? What's the problem? Complacency. Again, it's that human factor, right? I'm just going to do this. Yeah. So the only way you can fix that is through policing of your own safety issues.
Just a comment, I saw a interesting presentation a couple of years ago at a conference. There was a fellow there that had been a NASA astronaut, and he was talking about something he called the normalization of deviation.
Yes.
And it's a huge issue for safety, and everybody in the room wound up nodding their heads. Basically, yeah, he used some examples from the space program. The Challenger explosion is one, where they eventually figured out that the O-rings had a problem, and it turned out, if you went back in the history of that, they knew that there was an issue with them they had because of inspections that were happening with each flight, and the basic rules they started out with said if there was any damage to any of those O-rings, they couldn't fly, but if the schedule kept pressure on them, and so we went ahead, we flew, and the last time it didn't fail. So basically what happened was we break the rules a little bit, nothing happened this time, so it's really okay to keep doing it, and that becomes, it's a safety culture kind of an issue too. And you see that today in most places.
Well, there is that, I think you brought up one of the most important things is that culture of safety. If you're working for a company where I want you to get stuff done. Bottom line, I don't care what it takes. You get 6 frac trucks built in 2 months. I don't care. Don't tell me your problems. Just do it. And so if you're working in that culture, you are going to take shortcuts. You are going to turn a blind eye to some of your safety issues because bottom line, you're being told that the important thing is not you, it's the bottom line of money. So great dollar sign up there because we know that's what motivates just about everything in industry is money. So you're right. So hashtag mindset works really well with safety. I think you should switch to hashtag safety, AO, because it is a mindset. But if the CEO walks in and says, I don't care, get it done, get it out the door, you want to keep your job, you want to make him happy. So I just couldn't resist this one. So it looks like, the asses in the room actually know how to be safe. I love the one with the gloves on them. So, but another reason I picked this one is because way up in the middle of nowhere, this is from, this is in Bolivia, I believe. And they're on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere at this mining site. They have the gear. It's there. The question that's behoving is, are they actually using it? Is it just a joke? Right? So I think, no, safety's never a joke. However, when I was at the office this morning, one of the managers asked me, so what are you talking on, Phyllis? And I said, oh, safety, because Kimberly gave away my topic, which was the environment. So it's Kimberly's fault. But he says, well, don't forget to mention our safety record at One Eye Industries. And I go, oh, yeah, we've had over 5,000 days of no lost time. And that's a great record. And then he said, but that doesn't include the headaches that the CEO gives everybody every day, right? So, we got to work past Roger.
As a plant manager, what are the most common, or I guess frequent safety issues that arise for you? And then what's the easiest, or I guess the most efficient way to deal with them?
Well, it's the simple things that everybody can relate to. You've got cords running where they're not supposed to be running because you've got to get this done and this is the fastest way to get over there. You don't use your lift cranes properly. You don't wear your glasses. There's lots of simple things that can have catastrophic events, and that's what we forget. Oh, you know, I'm just going out there, I'm going to grind something for a second, I don't need my safety glasses, I can wear my glasses, and then you don't have an eye.
As manager of a plant, one of the biggest things is FaceTime. Leadership on the floor, in front of people, making sure that your supervisors actually have time to walk around the job, and not as cops, but supporting their people. They're the guys watching their back, making sure, you know, so people get caught up in paperwork and reports and meetings. If you're really focusing on safety as leadership, you have to have the FaceTime.
Oh, I agree, and I think too, if you do go out and you do give your managers time to be safe, and you do have real safety meetings, that creates an attitude within your workers that, geez, maybe they actually care. You know, maybe it isn't just all about the money. Maybe you actually care that I get home to my family safely every day. And I think if you can create that atmosphere in your workplace, you will have way more productive workers than people who are disgruntled that you have a ladder that's not safe and they're not buying you the right crane and they're not giving you the right gloves. It's as simple as giving somebody the right welding gloves, because they don't give a crap about me. Why should I do this? So I think if we can genuinely make a good safety plan, you'll have a lot better production. Thank you.